Francis Stevens here, 62 years old and the owner of Everglade Luxury Resorts, a fact my estranged daughter Cassandra doesn't know. For 20 years, I built my $60 million hotel empire while she grew up believing I was just a struggling hotel manager. 3 weeks before her wedding at my flagship property, she texted, "Mum, we'd prefer you not attend." Little did she know I held every card in this heartbreaking game. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. I was born to immigrant parents who worked their fingers to the bone to provide for our family. My father and mother ran a small roadside motel in upstate New York, a modest 12-room establishment that taught me the value of hard work and genuine hospitality from the moment I could reach the front desk. Every weekend and summer break, I helped change linens, check in guests, and solve problems with a smile. My parents believed in the American dream, but never imagined how far their daughter would eventually take their humble beginnings. When I was 22 and working as a front desk supervisor at a mid-range hotel chain, I met James Whitfield. Tall, confident, and from a family whose name appeared on buildings throughout Manhattan, James swept into my life like a character from a movie. He was staying at our hotel while overseeing a real estate acquisition nearby, and for some reason he noticed me. Our whirlwind romance shocked everyone, including myself. James found my work ethic refreshing compared to the socialites he typically dated, and I was admittedly dazzled by his world. We married after only 8 months, against the poorly hidden disapproval of his family. The Whitfields were old money with generations of privilege behind them, and I was unmistakably not from their world. At our wedding, his mother Eleanor wore an expression as if she smelled something unpleasant whenever she looked my way. James assured me they would warm up to me eventually. They never did. Our early marriage held moments of genuine happiness. James respected my independence and supported my continued work in hotel management, even as he suggested I might eventually want to focus on more suitable pursuits for a Whitfield wife. I ignored these comments, believing love would bridge our differences. When Cassandra was born, my heart expanded in ways I never thought possible. This perfect little girl, with her father's deep blue eyes and my dark curly hair, became my entire world. I threw myself into motherhood while maintaining my career, often bringing baby Cassandra to the hotel during quieter shifts. The staff adored her, and she grew up surrounded by the energy and diverse characters of hotel life. As Cassandra turned 3, 4, then 5, the first serious cracks appeared in our marriage. I discovered James had affairs during his frequent business trips, not even bothering to hide the evidence very carefully. When confronted, he seemed almost surprised by my anger, as though fidelity was a quaint expectation. Meanwhile, his family's subtle digs at my background became increasingly overt, especially in front of Cassandra. They spoke of bloodlines and breeding around my daughter as though she were half thoroughbred, half mutt. I focused more intensely on my hotel career, finding I had a natural talent for the business beyond just operations. Understanding both luxury guests and hard-working staff gave me unique insights that my supervisors valued. I received my first management promotion when Cassandra was 6, taking over a struggling property and turning it around within a year. James's family saw my deepening career commitment as further evidence of my unsuitability. They began filling Cassandra's head with their elite values. During the weekends, they insisted on giving me a break by taking her to their Connecticut estate. My daughter returned from these visits with troubling questions. "Grandma says ladies don't work in hotels, so why do you, Mum, or Cousin Amelia's mother plans charity galas instead of working? Grandma says that's more dignified." When Cassandra turned 12, James announced he wanted a divorce. He had fallen in love with Sylvia, the daughter of one of his father's business partners, and wanted to start fresh. The custody battle that followed revealed the true power of wealth and influence. James hired a team of lawyers who painted me as a workaholic mother whose career would always come before her child. They emphasized my irregular hours and the unsuitable environment of hotel life for a young girl of Cassandra's breeding and potential. Despite spending every penny I had on legal fees, I lost primary custody. The judge awarded me alternate weekends and Wednesday dinners, a schedule that James's family immediately began interfering with through conveniently timed exclusive opportunities for Cassandra. Suddenly, there were equestrian competitions, debutante preparations, and European trips that couldn't possibly be rescheduled around my visitation. I faced the most difficult decision of my life. I could continue fighting a losing battle against the Whitfield fortune, draining my limited resources and energy, while watching my relationship with Cassandra deteriorate amid the conflict. Or I could focus on building security and success that might eventually give me the leverage to reconnect with my daughter on stronger terms. I chose the latter path, though it broke my heart. I poured myself into my career working double shifts and learning every aspect of hotel management and investment. Meanwhile, during our increasingly infrequent visits, Cassandra grew more distant. By 14, she barely disguised her embarrassment when introducing me to her friends from the exclusive private school the Whitfields selected. By 16, she was cancelling our meetings regularly, always with elaborate excuses that I knew came from her grandparents. The hardest moment came when I attended her high school graduation. Seated far from James and his family, I watched my beautiful daughter accept her diploma to enthusiastic applause from the Whitfield section. At the reception afterwards, I overheard Cassandra tell a friend I was just someone who works at a hotel, rather than identifying me as her mother. I cried the entire drive back to my apartment, but also felt my resolve strengthen. Someday, I promised myself she would see me clearly and perhaps with pride. After my painful experience at Cassandra's graduation, I made a strategic decision that would shape the next 2 decades of my life. I would stay in the hospitality industry where my experience and talent gave me an advantage, but I would hide my growing success from James and his family, not out of shame, but as protection against their interference and potential legal claims on my assets. My career took a pivotal turn when I met Gloria Ramirez, a 60-year-old executive at the hotel management company where I worked. Gloria recognized something in me that others had overlooked. After observing my turnaround of 2 struggling properties, she invited me to lunch at an upscale restaurant I could barely afford. "Francis," she said, studying me over her reading glasses, "you have a gift for this business that I rarely see. You understand both the high-end guest experience and the operational backbone that makes it possible. Have you ever thought about ownership rather than management?" I laughed, gesturing to my sensible department store suit. With what capital I spent everything fighting for custody of my daughter. Gloria slid a folder across the table. "There's a distressed property upstate. 30 rooms, decent structure, but terrible management. The bank is foreclosing next month. I have investors who might back the right operator with a minority stake to start." That lunch changed my life. With Gloria's mentorship and a small group of investors who believed in my vision, I purchased my first hotel. I worked 18-hour days, lived in one of the rooms, and reinvested every penny of profit. My approach to luxury hospitality was distinctive, focusing on genuine warmth and flawless service, rather than the cold pretentiousness I had observed in many high-end establishments. I trained staff to anticipate needs without intrusion and to solve problems with creativity rather than rigid policies. The hotel broke even within 6 months and showed remarkable profitability by year 2. Using this success, I secured financing for a second acquisition, a larger property near the Berkshires that attracted both New York and Boston weekend travelers. I created the Everglade brand identity, drawing on my childhood memories of family vacations to Florida, where natural beauty coexisted with comfort. As my small portfolio grew to 5 properties, I made a crucial decision about corporate structure. Every hotel operated under different LLCs, all owned by a parent company, with a generic name that couldn't be easily connected to me personally. I maintained a modest apartment and lifestyle, driving the same reliable sedan for years. This wasn't just about protecting assets from James's potential claims. It had become a psychological test. I wanted Cassandra to value me for who I was, not what I owned. My flagship acquisition came in year 10, a struggling historic property in the Hamptons that had once hosted Gatsby-era parties, but had fallen into disrepair. I poured resources into a tasteful renovation that preserved its character while adding modern luxury touches. When it reopened, celebrities and influencers discovered its discreet elegance and impeccable service, making it the season's most desirable location. Yet few connected the property to me personally, as I remained intentionally behind the scenes. Those years were professionally triumphant, but personally lonely. I worked 80-hour weeks, sacrificing any semblance of a personal life. Several promising relationships withered under my work schedule and reluctance to share my true circumstances. My apartment remained a sparse crash pad rather than a home. Every holiday season, I sent Cassandra thoughtful gifts that often went unacknowledged and made brief, awkward phone calls that left me aching for the little girl who once fell asleep in my arms during hotel night shifts. Throughout Cassandra's teen years, I continued reaching out despite her increasing distance. When college applications began, I offered to help with tuition, knowing it would strain my personal finances, but unwilling to touch company assets for this purpose. James's mother called me directly, her voice dripping with condescension. "That won't be necessary," Eleanor stated. "The Whitfield Educational Trust will cover Cassandra's expenses at Princeton. We've handled everything." Of course they had. More strings to bind my daughter to their world while cutting the threads that connected her to mine. By the 20th anniversary of my first hotel purchase, Everglade Luxury Resorts had grown to 15 properties across the Northeast and Florida, with a market valuation exceeding $60 million. Industry insiders knew of our reputation for excellence and profitability, but few connected the company to Francis Stevens personally. I had become exactly what I had set out to be, a successful, independent businesswoman who could stand proudly beside any Whitfield. But the achievement felt hollow without my daughter to share it with. On the night Everglade reached the $60 million valuation milestone, my executive team organized a small celebration. As they toasted my vision and leadership, I excused myself early. In my car, I pulled out my phone to see recent photos of Cassandra from social media, now a beautiful young woman of 32, who looked at the camera with her father's confident smile and sometimes hints of my determination around the eyes. I wondered if she would ever know the truth, or if I had built an empire that would remain forever invisible to the one person whose recognition I most desired. After graduating from Princeton with honors, Cassandra moved to New York City and secured a position at a prestigious fashion magazine. I learned this not from her directly, but from the alumni update section of the university newsletter I still received. With cautious hope, I reached out with a congratulatory message and an invitation to lunch. To my surprise, she accepted. We met at a casual bistro far from both her office and any of my properties. Cassandra arrived 20 minutes late, immaculately dressed in designer clothes that probably cost more than 3 months of my apparent salary. She air-kissed my cheek and immediately began checking her phone. "Sorry, crazy deadline week," she explained without looking up. "How are you? Mum still at the same hotel?" I had prepared for this question. "Actually, I've moved to a regional management position, overseeing operations for several properties now." This earned a brief glance and perfunctory smile. That's nice. Dad says the hospitality industry is facing disruption from tech platforms. Have you considered a career change before it's too late? And so our reunion went with Cassandra alternating between distracted phone checks and subtle reminders of the superior wisdom and connections available through her father's world. Yet, beneath her practiced sophistication, I occasionally glimpsed moments of genuine curiosity about my life, and even flashes of the warm-hearted girl I remembered. These glimpses gave me hope, and I committed to rebuilding our relationship brick by brick. I suggested monthly lunches, always accommodating her schedule and location preferences. I listened attentively to her stories about magazine deadlines, fashion week dramas, and social climbers in her circle. I shared edited versions of my own experiences, celebrating small workplace victories while concealing their true significance. I decided early in this reconnection process that I would not reveal my true success until Cassandra showed genuine interest in me as a person, not just obligation toward a parent. I wanted to know that she could value me without the trappings of wealth that had defined her upbringing with James. 3 years into our tentative relationship rebuilding, Cassandra mentioned a new boyfriend during one of our lunches. Bradley Porter came from a family with old manufacturing money and political connections stretching back generations. From her description, he sounded exactly like the type of man the Whitfields would approve of, which both concerned and intrigued me. "You should meet him," she said, surprising me. "He's curious about you." I met Bradley the following week. Tall, conventionally handsome, with the practiced charm of someone raised to navigate social hierarchies, he reminded me immediately of James in our early days. He asked questions about my work with seemingly genuine interest, though his eyes occasionally flickered with something like assessment when I described my middle management role. 6 months later, Cassandra called with news of their engagement, speaking with more animation than I had heard from her in years. I felt a cautious optimism about this potential new chapter. Perhaps wedding planning could provide neutral ground for us to connect more authentically. My optimism dimmed considerably at the engagement party hosted at James's Manhattan penthouse. I received an invitation, which itself represented progress, but arrived to find myself seated at a back table with distant relatives and friends' parents. James and Eleanor Whitfield held court near the head table, while Bradley's parents, the distinguished-looking Richard and Victoria Porter, circulated among guests with practiced ease. During a bathroom break, I overheard Cassandra speaking to friends in the hallway. "Mum, she's just a hotel manager, not really part of this world. But she tries, it's kind of sweet." I pressed my back against the wall, breathing deeply to control the sting of tears. Sweet, like a child's drawing praised and then tucked away in a drawer. Still, I reminded myself she had invited me. It was a start. As wedding planning began in earnest, Cassandra assigned me minor tasks, like researching transportation options for out-of-town guests. Meanwhile, Victoria Porter took the lead alongside a high-end wedding planner named Meredith, whose clientele included celebrities and European aristocrats. During one planning session at the Porter's home, I learned that the wedding would take place at the Cliffside Manor in the Hamptons. My heart nearly stopped. The Cliffside Manor was my flagship property, the historic hotel whose renovation had established Everglades' reputation for understated luxury. Through some cosmic coincidence, my daughter had selected my crown jewel as her wedding venue, working through planners who apparently had no idea of my connection to the property. I saw this coincidence as a potential gift from the universe. Perhaps after the perfect wedding day, when Cassandra was glowing with happiness, I could finally reveal my true success in a positive context. I immediately contacted my executive team through private channels, instructing them to provide exceptional service, but maintain absolute discretion about ownership. Under no circumstances should anyone mention my connection to the property or company, I emphasized to my most trusted lieutenant. This needs to be perfect, but anonymous. As the wedding date approached, I allowed myself to imagine a reconciliation scene, Cassandra radiant in her gown, learning that her mother had created the beautiful setting for her special day. In this fantasy, she looked at me with new understanding and perhaps the beginnings of respect. After years of being diminished in her eyes, I would finally be seen. Reality, as it often does, had other plans. With the wedding 6 months away, I threw myself into helping however Cassandra would allow. I attended dress fittings when invited, offered suggestions when asked, and bit my tongue when Victoria Porter dismissed my ideas with practiced politeness. Through it all, I nurtured my secret hope that this wedding at my property would become the turning point in our relationship. Cassandra visited my modest one-bedroom apartment once during this period, wrinkling her nose slightly as she stepped inside. "You could afford something bigger than this on your salary, couldn't you? Even hotel management must pay better these days." I smiled tightly. "I'm comfortable here, never saw the point in spending money on excessive space." She wandered around, picking up the few personal photos I displayed, mostly of her as a child. "This place is so practical, like you." The way she said practical made it sound like a disappointing character flaw. During formal planning meetings at the Cliffside Manor, I offered occasional insights about the venue based on my industry knowledge. Cassandra frequently cut me off with a tight smile. "Mum, please stop pretending to be an expert on this place. The professionals have it handled." If she only knew that I had personally selected every marble tile in the grand ballroom, approved the restoration of every crown moulding, and chosen the exact shade of paint that created the perfect backdrop for golden hour photographs. Instead, I nodded and retreated into silence. Behind the scenes, I arranged special touches through my staff, ensuring Cassandra would have the most sought-after suite, customized welcome baskets for VIP guests, and priority attention from our best personnel. I approved menu upgrades and champagne enhancements at no additional cost, all while maintaining my cover. As the wedding date approached, tensions with Bradley's mother intensified. Victoria Porter had a particular vision for the wedding that aligned perfectly with Eleanor Whitfield's social expectations. During one tasting session, Victoria patted my hand condescendingly after I suggested a particular wine pairing. "Francis dear, we appreciate your budget-conscious perspective, but this isn't a corporate retreat. The sommelier and I have selected appropriate vintages." The sommelier in question, Antonio, caught my eye briefly with an apologetic glance. He had been personally hired by me 3 years earlier and knew exactly who signed his substantial Christmas bonus. I noticed Cassandra growing increasingly withdrawn as the wedding approached. She cancelled our scheduled dress-fitting appointment, sending a text that she had gone with Victoria instead. Our monthly lunches became briefer, with Cassandra checking her watch frequently. When I asked about her feelings or concerns, she deflected with logistical details about seating charts and floral arrangements. The most painful discovery came 2 months before the wedding, when I found Cassandra's wedding website while researching something else. Under the family section, James was listed as father of the bride, successful business leader and philanthropist. My name appeared nowhere. Instead, there was a brief mention of family members who have supported Cassandra's journey. Still, I persisted. I had contributed $50,000 toward the wedding expenses, nearly emptying my personal savings account to maintain my cover story while supporting my daughter. I never mentioned that I could have easily covered the entire wedding budget with a fraction of my actual wealth. Cassandra had accepted the money with barely a thank you, as though it were expected despite my supposedly modest means. 3 weeks before the wedding, everything collapsed. I received a text message from Cassandra while reviewing quarterly projections in my corporate office. "Mum, after talking with Bradley's family and Dad, we'd prefer you not attend the wedding. Your presence makes everyone uncomfortable and clashes with the overall atmosphere we're trying to create. We'll have lunch after the honeymoon to catch up. I'll make sure you get photos." I read the message 17 times, each word cutting deeper than the last. My executive assistant found me staring blankly at my computer screen an hour later, unresponsive to emails and calls. I sent her home and sat alone in my office until midnight, alternating between devastating grief and cold fury. The next morning, I received a call from Meredith, the wedding planner. Her tone was professional but uncomfortable. Ms. Stevens, I'm calling regarding your financial contribution to Cassandra Whitfield's wedding. I understand there's been a change in the guest list, but Ms. Whitfield has indicated that she intends to keep your deposit as it's too late for refunds on contracted services. Something inside me hardened into crystal clarity. 20 years of hiding my success, of diminishing myself to avoid threatening my daughter's affection, of accepting scraps of attention and enduring condescension. For what? To be discarded when even my physical presence became too inconvenient. I see, I replied calmly. Please cancel everything related to this event immediately. There was a startled pause on the line. But Mom, you're not the bride or the contracting party. I can't take such instructions from you. I allowed myself a small, cold smile. No, I'm the one who owns the $60 million venue, the catering, and the hotel chain they booked, and I think you'll find that I very much can cancel anything I want. After hanging up with the stunned wedding planner, I sat motionless at my desk for several long minutes. The decision I had just made would permanently alter my relationship with Cassandra, for better or worse. There would be no going back from this moment. Yet, beneath my grief, I felt something unexpected relief. The exhausting charade I had maintained for decades was finally ending. I called an emergency meeting with my executive leadership team. Many of them had worked with me for years, but knew nothing about my personal connection to the upcoming Whitfield Porter wedding. When they assembled in the conference room, I closed the door and took a deep breath. I need to share something personal that will affect business operations at the Cliffside property this weekend, I began. The bride in the Whitfield Porter wedding is my daughter. Surprised murmurs circulated around the table. My CFO, Thomas, who had been with me the longest, looked particularly shocked. In 20 years, you never mentioned having a daughter, he said quietly. She doesn't know I own Everglade. I explained and proceeded to give them the abbreviated version of my complicated history with Cassandra James and the Whitfield family. As of this morning, I've been uninvited from the wedding despite contributing a substantial personal deposit. The wedding planner informed me they intend to keep my money while excluding me from the event. My general counsel, Diane, frowned deeply. That's both legally questionable and morally reprehensible. I nodded. I've instructed the planner to cancel the event. I wanted you all to understand why and to prepare for the fallout. This will likely become messy and potentially public. My team exchanged glances, and then Thomas spoke for the group. We stand with you, Francis. What do you need from us? Their solidarity moved me deeply, reminding me that while I had lost family connections, I had built meaningful relationships with people who respected me for my actual accomplishments. I outlined my plan, emphasizing that while the wedding would be cancelled, I wanted the deposit money transferred to a local women's shelter rather than returned. That afternoon, I drove to the Cliffside Manor and parked my modest sedan among the luxury vehicles belonging to wedding vendors setting up for the weekend. No one recognized me as I entered through the main doors, dressed in my usual understated business attire. The lobby buzzed with activity as florists arranged elaborate displays and staff prepared welcome packages for the wedding guests. I spotted Meredith, the wedding planner, directing workers near the ballroom entrance. Her face paled when she saw me approaching. She had clearly researched my identity after our phone call. Ms. Stevens, or should I say Ms. Everglade, she stammered, using the corporate name I had adopted for business purposes. Francis is fine, I replied calmly. Is everything being dismantled as instructed? She glanced nervously at the workers continuing their setup. I tried contacting Ms. Whitfield and Mr. Porter multiple times, but they're not responding. I've also reached out to their parents, but, she lowered her voice, I'm in an impossible position. The contract is with them, but you own the venue. Legally, I don't know how to proceed. I nodded understandingly. I've instructed my legal team to prepare documentation confirming the cancellation comes from ownership. You'll be indemnified against any claims from the wedding party. As we spoke, commotion erupted at the entrance to the ballroom. James had arrived still handsome at 65, though, with silver hair and deeper lines around his perpetually confident expression. He strode toward us with the entitlement of someone unaccustomed to obstacles. "What the hell is going on here? The florist says they've been told to stop work." He froze when he recognized me, confusion crossing his face. "Francis, what are you doing here and why are you interfering?" I smiled politely. "Hello, James. It's been a while." He glanced between me and the nervous wedding planner. "Whatever issues you have with not being invited, this is completely inappropriate. If you need to speak with Cassandra, do it after her wedding." "There isn't going to be a wedding, James. Not at this property." His expression darkened. "What are you talking about? You can't possibly have any say in this matter." I reached into my bag and retrieved a business card and company documentation. "Actually, I own the Cliffside Manor and the Everglade Luxury Resorts Group that manages it. I've cancelled the event." James stared at the materials, disbelief giving way to understanding and then anger. "This is ridiculous. You've been hiding this for how long? 20 years. Since shortly after you used your family's influence to limit my access to our daughter." His face flushed. "I'll sue you for fraud, for misrepresentation, for building a successful business while you weren't looking," I interrupted calmly. "My legal team welcomes the challenge. Meanwhile, this private property is no longer available for your event." As James sputtered threats, Bradley's parents arrived, followed by Eleanor Whitfield. The scene quickly devolved into chaos as I calmly explained the situation to each new arrival. Victoria Porter looked as though she might faint when she realised the social disaster unfolding. Eleanor Whitfield's face hardened into the same disapproving mask she had worn at our first meeting decades earlier. "You've always been vindictive," Eleanor spat. "Always jealous of what James could provide that you couldn't." I looked at this woman who had contributed so much to the estrangement from my daughter and felt a surprising lack of anger. She simply didn't matter anymore. "What I couldn't provide was the illusion that money and social status determine a person's worth," I replied evenly. "For that I'm grateful." As hotel security arrived to escort the increasingly hostile group to the lobby, I remained in the ballroom, watching as workers began carefully dismantling the elaborate wedding setup. The flowers would go to local hospitals, the prepared food to homeless shelters. Nothing would be wasted except the years I had spent hiding my true self from my daughter. The morning of what would have been Cassandra's wedding day dawned with perfect Hamptons weather sunshine spilling across the manicured grounds of the Cliffside Manor. I arrived early and sat alone in the empty reception hall, a space that should have been filled with celebration, but now contained only elegantly arranged furniture and the faint scent of lilies from the few arrangements I had allowed to remain. Hotel staff had reported that neither the bride nor groom had been seen on property, but several confused guests had arrived and been informed of the cancellation. James and Eleanor had apparently relocated to their Hamptons residence to manage the crisis, while the Porters had retreated to their Manhattan apartment. No one knew where Cassandra and Bradley were staying. Shortly before noon, the double doors to the reception hall swung open. Cassandra stood there in casual clothes, her face pale and drawn, with Bradley beside her, looking thunderous. They spotted me immediately, sitting calmly at what would have been the head table. "What have you done?" Cassandra's voice echoed across the empty space, cracking with emotion. I remained seated, forcing them to approach me rather than rushing to explain. "I've stopped allowing myself to be erased," Cassandra stormed toward me, Bradley following with clenched fists. "You ruined everything. Over what? A petty invitation slight. Do you know how humiliating this is?" "Petty invitation slight," I repeated softly. "You didn't just uninvite me, Cassandra. You erased me from your life story. You took my money while treating me as an embarrassment." And you did it all without knowing who I really am. What are you talking about? Her frustration was palpable. I own this Hotel Cassandra and every other Everglade property. I built a $60 million company while you and the Whitfields were busy being ashamed of my work ethic. Her expression shifted from anger to confusion. That's impossible. You're a hotel manager. I was. Then I became an owner, then a founder, then a CEO. I've employed hundreds of people and created exceptional experiences for thousands more, all while you were learning to look down on service industry workers from your father's family. Bradley stepped forward, face flushed. This is absurd. If you owned all this, why would you live in that tiny apartment? Why pretend to be something you're not? Because I wanted my daughter to love me for who I am, not what I own. I turned back to Cassandra. I wanted to know if you could value me without the trappings of wealth that James used to win you over. Cassandra sank into a chair, struggling to process this revelation. I don't understand. Why would you hide this from me? At first, it was protection against your father's potential claims on my growing assets. Then it became a test, a way of seeing if you could ever appreciate me without the status symbols that impress the Whitfields. So this was all some manipulative test. And when I failed, you destroyed my wedding. Her voice rose again. No, I said firmly. I maintained my privacy while still attempting to build a relationship with you. I contributed financially to your wedding despite being treated as an afterthought. I only took action when you excluded me entirely while keeping my money. That crossed a line that self-respect wouldn't allow me to ignore. James burst into the hall, then followed by Eleanor and both of Bradley's parents. There you are, he called to Cassandra. Don't worry, we're handling everything. The country club is preparing for the ceremony this evening. I watched as the family group converged, immediately closing ranks and discussing contingency plans, as though I weren't present. Bradley's father glanced dismissively in my direction. Is she still causing problems? We should call security. She owns the hotel, Cassandra said flatly, bringing the conversation to an abrupt halt. James attempted to take control. Yes, through some deceptive maneuvering that our lawyers will address. For now, let's focus on salvaging the wedding. Deceptive. I stood finally, my patience exhausted. Like telling our daughter that her mother was unworthy of respect because she worked in service. Like using your family's money and connections to limit my access to my child. Like teaching her that status matters more than character. Don't be dramatic, Francis, Eleanor cut in. Cassandra had every advantage because of our family's position. What could you have offered her? Authenticity, I answered simply. The understanding that real worth comes from what you build and how you treat others, not your last name or account balance. Victoria Porter addressed Cassandra directly, ignoring me. Darling, we don't need to continue this unpleasant scene. The cars are waiting to take everyone to the country club. We can still have a beautiful wedding. Bradley took Cassandra's arm. She's right. Let's go. We can deal with all this later. I watched my daughter's face, closely seeing the conflict there as she stood at a crossroads between the values she had been raised with and the uncomfortable truth I represented. For a moment, the outcome hung in the balance. Bradley tugged her arm more insistently. Cassandra, the guests are waiting. Everyone's been called. We need to go now. His voice carried an ultimatum. Cassandra looked at him, then at me, then back to the assembled family members who clearly expected her to fall in line. Something shifted in her expression. No, she said quietly. What do you mean, no? Bradley's grip tightened on her arm. She pulled free. I mean no. I'm not going anywhere right now. She turned to face me directly. I need to talk to my mother. Bradley's face darkened. You can't be serious. After what she's done, we have 200 guests waiting. Go without me if it's that important, Cassandra replied, her voice stronger. The shock on Bradley's face would have been comical in another context. Without the bride, are you having some kind of breakdown? Maybe I am, she said. Maybe I need one. Bradley looked to his parents for support. This is ridiculous. We're not cancelling because of her family drama. It's my wedding too, Cassandra said firmly, and I'm not ready to get married today. The porters exchanged alarmed glances while James looked thunderstruck. Bradley's face flushed dark red. Fine, have your crisis. Call me when you remember what matters. He stormed out his parents, following after throwing reproachful looks at Cassandra. James hesitated. Cassandra, think about what you're doing. I am thinking, Dad. Maybe for the first time in years. Her voice was tired but resolute. Please go. I need to speak with Mom alone. After a moment of stunned silence, James and Eleanor departed, leaving Cassandra and me alone in the vast, empty reception hall. The silence stretched between us after everyone left, 20 years of misunderstandings and missed connections hanging in the air. Cassandra stared at the elaborate centerpiece on the nearest table, a stunning arrangement of orchids and roses that would never be appreciated by wedding guests. I don't even know where to start, she finally said, her voice small in the cavernous space. I moved to sit across from her, close enough to talk, but giving her the distance she seemed to need. We can start anywhere. We have time now. She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. How did you do it? Build all this without anyone knowing? It wasn't the question I expected, but it offered a neutral entry point. I told her about my first struggling property, about Gloria's mentorship, about sleeping in a hotel room while reinvesting every penny of profit. I described the careful corporate structure designed to protect assets and maintain privacy. As I spoke, Cassandra listened with growing attention, occasionally asking pointed questions that revealed her intelligence and business acumen. Dad always said you weren't ambitious enough, she remarked after I explained a particularly complex acquisition. He was wrong. Your father and I valued different things, I replied carefully. He measured success through visible status. I found meaning in building something enduring, even if few people knew it was mine. But why keep it from me? The hurt in her voice was unmistakable. All these years letting me think. At first it was practical. I was protecting a fledgling business from potential legal claims during the divorce. Then, as you grew more distant, influenced by the Whitfield perspective, I worried that revealing my success would feel like a bid to buy your affection. I wanted you to value me for who I was, not what I owned. I paused, acknowledging a painful truth. Eventually, it became a test I never gave you the chance to pass. Cassandra wiped away a tear. I was awful to you for years. You were a child caught between worlds, heavily influenced by the one that had more apparent advantages to offer. She shook her head. I'm 34, Mum. I've been an adult making my own choices for a long time, choices that hurt you. This simple acknowledgement moved me more than any elaborate apology could have. Yes, I said softly, they did. We sat in silence again, but it felt different now, thoughtful rather than tense. I don't think I can marry Bradley, she said suddenly. Because of what happened today? No, because of how he reacted. She twisted her engagement ring absently. When things got difficult, when I needed a moment to process something important, his concern was for appearances, for what others would think. That's not partnership. I nodded, careful not to show relief or satisfaction. This realization needed to be entirely hers. What happens now? She asked. Whatever we choose, I can arrange a suite here for you to stay while you sort things out, or help you return to the city, or anything else you need. Could we just talk more? There's so much I don't know about you. That night, we moved to the presidential suite of the hotel ordering room service and talking until dawn. I shared stories of my childhood, of meeting her father, of the joy of her birth and the pain of our separation. She described her experiences growing up among the Whitfields, the pressure to conform, and her gradual adoption of their values, despite inner doubts. We cried together over lost years and missed opportunities, and laughed at unexpected connections we discovered. I always loved hotels, Cassandra confessed around 3 in the morning. even while pretending to be embarrassed by your work. There's something magical about these spaces where life's important moments happen. I used to sketch hotel room layouts when I was supposed to be doing homework. I never knew that, I said, feeling the weight of all I had missed. You couldn't have. I didn't show that part of myself to the Whitfields, and eventually I stopped showing it to you too. It seemed safer to be who they wanted me to be. 3 months after the cancelled wedding, Cassandra surprised me by applying for an entry-level position in Everglades' management training program. I want to learn the business properly, she insisted when I suggested she could start with more responsibility. No special treatment. She moved into a modest apartment, returned her extravagant engagement ring, and began working front desk shifts at our Manhattan property. Hotel staff who knew me were initially wary, wondering if the owner's daughter would expect preferential treatment. Instead, they found someone eager to learn, unafraid of hard work, and genuinely interested in guest experiences. I watched with pride as she navigated this new path, occasionally offering advice when asked, but mostly giving her space to find her own way. We established a weekly dinner tradition, gradually rebuilding our relationship on more authentic ground. 6 months into her new role during one of our dinners, Cassandra mentioned an idea for a wellness-focused boutique hotel concept targeting younger travelers. Her eyes lit up as she described sustainable design elements and community integration strategies. It's probably too early for me to be pitching concepts, she said, suddenly self-conscious. I've barely learned the basics. It's never too early for good ideas, I replied. Would you like to develop this into a formal proposal? Her surprised smile reminded me so much of her childhood excitement that my heart ached with joy. You'd consider it seriously. Of course. That's how I built this company, recognizing potential and giving it room to grow. 1 year after the wedding that never happened, I invited Cassandra to my real home, a comfortable but understated house on a quiet street that reflected my actual taste rather than the sparse apartment I had maintained as cover. As we shared coffee on the patio overlooking a small garden, she asked the question I had been waiting for. Do you regret it, the way everything happened? I considered carefully before answering. I regret the years of deception, the opportunities for honest connection we missed. But I don't regret finally standing up for myself, even though it happened in a painful way. Without that moment, we might never have found our way to this. Cassandra nodded thoughtfully. I'm starting to understand that sometimes the most painful moments create space for the most important growth. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find out what truly matters. I agreed. I built an empire trying to win back my daughter, only to discover that honesty would have been the shorter path. But we're here now, and every painful step led to this moment of truth between us. Now, looking back at our journey, I wonder how many of you have experienced that moment when standing up for yourself feels like risking everything. Have you ever had to choose between peace and truth in a relationship? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if our story touched you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of family reconciliation and personal growth. Thank you for joining me on this journey of healing, and remember that it's never too late to rebuild what matters most.